It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel horrible. A lot of people say I'm a songbird of my generation, but I'll let you be the judge. Um, it is the end of the world as we know it. Things are falling apart. People in charge are really not knowing what they're doing, being very reactionary. And the contagion in the banking sector, as I've said many times, is only just beginning. And if you want to explain this to your normie friends, um, the way I like to think about it is, hey, they inject money into the system, and the system needs to find a place for it, whether it's productive or not. Whether it's productive or not. And commercial mortgage-backed securities are one of those things that aren't really productive. And a security, if you're unfamiliar, is you probably remember from The Big Short, these mortgage-backed securities. They take all these mortgages, they package them up into a security like a bond, and then they sell it with some kind of interest rate attached. Now, here's the catch: the difference with a bond is if you wait till maturity, you will get 100 cents on the dollar. Commercial mortgage-backed security, not necessarily the case. If people stop paying their mortgages, guess what happens? It goes to zero. It goes to zero. So, guess what? People are not paying their mortgages. And to illustrate the size of this problem, I want to show you this Twitter thread from her name's Genevieve Roche Dector, Dector, certified financial advisor. But she has some interesting things to say about the data. What she says at the top, she's a great Twitter follower, by the way. By the way, what happened with Silicon Valley Bank is just a blip compared to the larger time bomb sitting on banks' balance sheets. Here's the even larger issue investors should worry about. CMBS, commercial mortgage backed securities. Guess what? See this little up and to the right movement that happened during, I don't know, liquidity getting injected into the system? Banking industry increased its exposure to commercial real estate heading into the pandemic. Again, unproductive real estate. Because guess what else happened during the pandemic? The way we work changed like that. Okay. All of a sudden, people are working from home. The people are ordering from places like Amazon. And so these, things like malls and brick and mortar stores, not as necessary. And that happened fairly quickly. At the same time, these companies are buying commercial mortgage backed securities. Now let's look at where those are, who owns most of those. There's a record amount of commercial mortgages expiring this year, $270 billion worth. Chump change, obviously. Most of these loans are held by banks with less than $250 billion in assets, according to the Wall Street Journal, meaning small to medium sized banks. The banks. The banks that Janet Yellen's not going to back. I'm sorry that I'm laughing, but it's just like clown world. It's clown world. So she's not going to back these smaller banks. At least she's saying that. And then from Jerome Powell during the FOMC, he's like, "You should have faith that we will maybe definitely kind of sort of maybe back people." Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so what happens is people pull their money out and they don't have the money to pay depositors because it's held up in commercial mortgage-backed securities and treasuries. And again, the difference between those is a commercial mortgage-backed security held to maturity can actually go to zero because people can literally stop. It relies on a third party. A bond only relies on one other party. That is the solvency of the U.S. government. A commercial mortgage-backed security has multiple parties involved that have to pay their mortgages. And what happens if they don't? Yeah, it's bad. Silicon Valley Bank collapse was triggered by 1.8 billion loss from its bond portfolio. That's what triggered them to go insolvent, or at least not to pay people's withdrawals. The losses from the commercial real estate loans that go into default could be much, much higher. Jerome Powell acknowledged concerns for the small banks that hold these commercial loans. Says here the Fed mentioned that they are concerned about smaller banks and their commercial real estate exposure during the February meeting. And we see why. Small banks hold 70% of commercial real estate loans or commercial mortgage backed securities. Commercial real estate appears increasingly vulnerable as a result. Mhm. So, what happens? Let's play this out. What happens when uh, good old, let's just take a small bank. I bank with USAA. Let's say USAA has a ton of these commercial mortgage backed securities on its books. And a bunch of people go, hey, you know what? I don't think that USAA is covered by this Fed invented insurance yesterday. So I'm going to take my money out. And in the digital age, people can take their money out real quick, right? So take their money out and they put it in JP Morgan Chase. USAA doesn't have the money to give them because what they did with the deposits was buy commercial mortgage backed securities. So they're forced to sell them on the open market. And guess what those are worth? 10 cents on the dollar. So the money that people think they have in these banks, which is why, by the way, if you didn't hear, Janet Yellen had an emergency meeting today, closed door, just in case. Everything's fine. Yeah, right. All right. So back to this story here. So these smaller banks own the majority of these. Oh my gosh. Smaller banks own the majority of these commercial mortgage-backed securities. If a small bank takes on huge losses on a few bad loans, they either need to be bailed out or left to fail. Now, if you were asking yourself, there's a lot of people going, oh, this is QE, this is not QE, and there's a lot of these financial terms. And if you're like me, you're like, what the heck? If a bank fails, that is deflationary, right? Money is taken out of the system. Money is lost. Depositors lose money. But the problem is with banks failing is it the whole system, the whole house of cards, which is totally a confidence game. That's why the Fed's stepping in because the confidence game is real thin right now, and they can't have people just panicking. It's not good. Okay, if it was a company failing, who cares? If it's a crypto company, who cares? But banks, if the banking system, people doubt the credibility of the bank being able to pay them back, that whole system, this fiat Ponzi that's going on, that whole thing crumbles. That's why we're talking about bailing out banks, right? But to act like a bank failing and then getting bailed out, the if it didn't get bailed out, it would be deflationary, right? The whole house of cards, or at least that bank, would collapse and maybe there would be contagion, which would be deflationary because people would get worried. And the opposite of that is the federal government bailing them out. To act like that isn't inflationary because the opposite would be deflationary, therefore inflationary, right? Is kind of a joke, kind of a play on words. And Mark Moss said, technically correct, but intellectually dishonest because the net result is more money in the system, right? Anyways, these small banks take huge losses. While massive institutions may be able to take on multi-billion-dollar hits, small banks can't take a proportionately large hit to their business because they have less liquidity. 2023 will be the year of reckoning. Commercial real estate investments that suffered in 2020 and 2021 may have been able to stall for a bit, but many of those loans are coming due in 2023. Can the borrowers make good on those loans? That's for you to decide. Commercial loans are usually much shorter term than residential mortgages and often have a floating rate. What have rates done? Yep, that's right, gone up. So business going down, rates going up. So these commercial real estate projects, they're like, oh, hey, I don't have any business to even pay for the mortgage, number one. And then the mortgage goes up. They're SOL. This makes 2023 a challenge. Rising rates plus falling demand equals price declines. The combination of high rates and massive decline in demand of certain real estate and classes over the last few years, retail, for example, could be a disaster. Rates will adjust higher, which will lower the prices of existing real estate. Banks have two main worries. Defaults could rise, prices could collapse. In both scenarios, banks' commercial debt portfolios would tank in value, and both of those may feed off of each other. Lower prices create more defaults as more borrowers go underwater. Issuance of commercial mortgage-backed securities are down 78% year over year, according to the New York Times. That means banks are tightening up and not lending. That signals that they are worried about the future prospects of the commercial real estate and liquidity of current portfolios. Y'all tell me, do you think that this this house of cards and these tiny banks is not going to blow up? In my opinion, it is. And that's what a lot of, by the way, with this bailing out the banks, they don't even know what's on their balance sheet. It's this fractional reserve lending is this game of that shell game, right? It's like move money over here, do this over here, and then it all comes to a head when people need their money. And regardless of if there's a run on the bank, I'll say that again, we are going into a recession. So whether people are worried about the solvency of a bank, what happens during a recession? People need money. That means they need their deposits, whether they were worried about the solvency of a bank or not. So more liquidity is going to get pulled out of the bank, regardless if people are worried about the solvency. One huge house of cards with people who are in charge that are just like, it's a good idea. Let's put billions of dollars towards ESG. Let's run our country on unicorn farts right now. And so the beatings will continue until morale improves. I think the people in charge are so that they have blinders on to what's going on. They actually probably are seeing these warning signs and behind closed doors are like low-key panicked. And I actually think Yellen had to go to the hospital because she had a massive number of headaches. She's probably dealing with a lot right now because what she's saying and what she's thinking are probably two different things. She's in her head, she's probably like, panic. This is insane. But she has to put on a face. She has to pretend like everything's fine when it's not. So, y'all let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Follow me and in Twitter, on Instagram at AmpGrade. See y'all in the next one. Peace.